So glad to bring you right into the AFA Today studios here in New York City. A quick look out the window, and you see that the traffic and foot traffic, especially in Times Square, quite busy today. And so we're glad to be with you. Beautiful day here in New York. And as we are checking the midday look at what's going on in the news, Calvin McCullough, standing post per usual. Yesterday, we had an hour-long discussion about the types of biases and things that are experienced in modern culture these days. I've said repeatedly in recent days that I see a test of constitutional powers coming to different sectors of life. We saw the Martin Luther King celebration over the weekend exclude a pastor from its participation for the sole reason that he was formerly someone who practiced homosexuality, and now he isn't. And because of that, he evidently isn't tolerant enough. So the organizers of the Martin Luther King observance in Washington last Saturday excluded him, even though he was the headlining artist for the concert. Donnie McClurkin's his name. We talked about the differentials in the California schools and how parents of religious freedom wanting to have their kids go to school without being having sexuality thrust into their face on a daily basis are now waking up to the reality that their kids will be sharing locker rooms and bathrooms with people of the opposite gender simply to appease a very small portion of the schooled population there. That brought us to yesterday's broadcast in this kind of ongoing discussion about religious freedoms and its presence in our life today and what's going on. And we reported to you about the Brevard County Public School textbook for world history, but not just in that county. 51% of the school districts in the state of Florida using the same textbook put out by Prentice Hall called World History, in which 36 total pages are dedicated to the cause of Islam. 3 paragraphs are all that Christianity is mentioned as. And in the process of that, wanted to take your thoughts and feelings about it. Well, as a result, some of you called, and I trust that you were polite, as I asked you to be, when you called the school district. And evidently there were a lot of people in Florida that felt strongly about the world history book. And so I thought to be fair and to give the other side, or at least to give the side of the school district the opportunity to be heard, that we would invite on Michelle Irwin, who is the Director of District Communications, Public Information Officer for the School Board of Brevard County. Michelle, welcome to AFA Today. Kevin McCullough, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to come on with your guests.
Sure
Many
thing.
of which I've spoke to throughout the last day or so.
I was about to say, how did it? What happened in your office that you suddenly thought maybe we should have this conversation?
Well, I think what drove the conversation were a couple of things, and that was many of your listeners called with the understanding, or they came away with this idea that somehow we are promoting the teaching of Islam among our students, and we are blocking the teaching of how Christianity and Judaism impacted his story. And so I wanted to, I spent a lot of time talking with them and share with them how content standards are derived, how they're developed in the state of Florida. And I thought, well, instead of talking to each one individually, maybe I could come on here and kind of share some of that with your entire audience.
Sure. We're speaking with Michelle Irwin. She's the Director of District Communications, Public Information Officer for the Brevard County Schools, and we're following up on our discussion from yesterday. Michelle, before you get into the nitty-gritty of that, let me just ask you a couple of clarifying questions, because I want to make sure that we're fair as we report. Does the textbook contain 36 pages on the history of Islam and its rise in the world scene in this particular world history textbook that we're talking about?
Yes, in this particular one it does.
Okay. And are there only 3 paragraphs referencing Christianity? I'm not trying to drive an agenda. I just want to make sure I'm accurate on what I've been telling people.
Sure. I wouldn't be able to tell you. I haven't read the book front to cover, from front to back myself.
But you don't have anything that would dispute necessarily parents that did or that took a look at it and that had
absolutely
qualms
not.
with it?
Matter of fact, we've had lots of people coming into our offices, sitting down and looking through it. And I'm encouraging people. A lot of the calls that I've gotten have been they've heard something on the radio or on Fox or something like that, and they insist because they've heard that this is exactly, that it's a biased teaching of Islam, that's true. And I encourage people, read the book, look at the book, and write down some of your concerns.
That's completely fair. The school board members that were in attendance at the meeting earlier this week took a look at it, and I think just based on the weight of the amount of information in the book comparatively, I think that a couple of school board members said it does appear to be biased. I don't think that they sat down and read it in depth, but I think that was the initial impression, even by school board members, that it was brought to the attention of.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how we teach world history.
Okay.
In Florida, world history is broken up over 2 years. And again, this is a survey of world history. Obviously, we can't teach students everything that's ever happened in history.
Understood.
So it's a survey of the major events that impacted world history. And we start in the 6th grade. In 2008, the Florida legislature moved the Sunshine Standards that really spoke to the how Christianity and Judaism impacted world history. We don't teach the religion and only refer to the scriptures or the Quran as it relates to explaining how it's impacted history. At that point, it was moved down into the 6th grade level. So we start with ancient world history, and there is a much higher emphasis in the 6th grade level on how Judaism and Christianity impacted world history. Then we take a couple years away from world history, focusing on U.S. history, and come back in 9th grade, and we pick up where we left off. And so at that point, why you see in this textbook these 3 paragraphs people keep quoting, it's not just 3 paragraphs, but it's a review of the standards that were taught in the 6th grade. Because obviously, if you're going to teach early American history, you don't reteach the Civil War or the American War when you're supposed to be teaching the Civil War, but you use it as a reference to compare and contrast what had happened. And so that is what's happened here, and that was the part I think people are not getting in some of the exposure by the media, and I wanted to share with them because students in Brevard County in Florida are learning about Judaism and Christianity and how they impacted our history, our world history.
Well, with some caveats. They're learning about it if they go through the Florida 6th grade program, and they're learning about it if they happen to be in a school that uses the weighted books the way you describe. I'm curious if that is the case unilaterally across the state, because if 51% of the 9th grade classes are using the textbook that you're using this year, if it is not juxtaposed by the offset 6th grade curriculum, then you do have some misweighted attention being given to the issue of Islam.
Let me give you I can assure you that across the state of Florida, they are, because we all align to the New Generation Sunshine Standards. So we have to teach it. Now, what happens in addition in Florida is the state, we have a couple adoption processes for textbook adoption. So the first is that the state looks at certain textbooks and they develop a state-approved textbook list. And by law, by statute, each school district has to purchase at least 50% of their textbooks off the state-approved list. We had 3 books to look at when we were adopting this particular textbook.
How many parents were involved in the selection of the book that ultimately was approved?
We had a committee that comprised of teachers, parents, administrators, and they represented we're a county-based system here, so they represented sections of the county. It was a 1-year review process. They had presentations by the publishers. They went through a rubric and looked at how the textbooks, each of the 3 textbooks, aligned with the Sunshine Standards, and made their ultimate recommendation to the board after we had 2 open forums for community members to come in and review the textbooks and give their feedback and their input. And I think, Kevin, this is something that I really want to stress with your community. I think it's great that the people care. I mean, that's the one thing I heard loud and clear through the emails and the phone messages that I received. They care. But what happens is I don't think a lot of people really get the fact that decisions like textbook adoption, decisions about how we teach, the content standards, are local decisions. And so calling me from Texas is great. I love to talk to different people and get their perspectives. But how you can make impact, how you can change what's going on in the schools is starting at your local school district.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Going to board meetings, getting on these advisory committees. When we notice out there that we're having these open forums, and it's tough, I get it, I'm a working mom too, but getting involved at the local level. We have over 25,000 volunteers in Brevard Public Schools, and these people are actively tutoring kids. They're involved in, homework support. That's how we make a change, not sending emails to people that really can't do anything. I'm talking about a lot of this stuff came through to our receptionists and things like that. I'm not telling people don't call. I'm not telling people don't email. But if you really want to make a difference, it starts in your local school district.
I agree with that, Michelle. We're speaking with Michelle Irwin, who is the Director of District Communications for the School Board of Brevard County. We discussed the Brevard County World History Curriculum yesterday on this broadcast. And we did encourage Floridians, particularly those in your area, to start the process and to have that conversation. I can't help it if other people got excited and wished to be part of the conversation as well, because I think, Michelle, what you're seeing is a nationwide concern about curriculum standards and what we are teaching and what is perceived to be, in recent history, a softening of the understanding of what actual Islam is, and I'll just state it, an outright bias in some circles, academic being one of them, toward what traditional Christianity actually teaches and what the understanding of Judaism and Christianity is, even on the American culture and the history of our work ethic here, and why it played a role in the development of America. So I don't necessarily think that people shouldn't speak out when something isn't going on just in their backyard. But I agree with you that the way to get involved, and something that I encourage people to do all the time, is not only get involved in their local school board, even if they don't send their kids to that school. Being involved in the schools that are in your community, I still feel like is a taxpayer's opportunity to truly impact. Let me ask you,
think about it.
This started. Let me get to my next question, because I want to make sure I have plenty of time to get it answered. When we started the discussion of this yesterday, it was all spun off of coverage of your actual school board meeting, and the solutions that were suggested at the school board meeting was a supplemental program of some sort to the disgruntled residents. Can you address that for a second? What is actually being proposed by the school board to supplement the ninth grade curriculum?
What we're doing now is we're putting a committee together of some content experts and others, and this just happened Tuesday night, so we don't have it all laid out exactly the way we want to yet. But we're going to be putting together a committee. We're going to identify some of those key areas that seem to be raising the greatest amount of concern, and then we're going to ask these people to develop some supplemental guides and materials to use in conjunction with our textbook. Keep in mind, when we adopt a textbook like this, and I wanted to point this one out too to you, Kevin, and that is there are very few textbook publishers out there, and that kind of straps us a little bit as well. And so that's another way people can get involved too, is with the publishers of the textbooks. But when we look at the supplemental materials in the textbooks, again, we don't go page by page. I don't know how old you are, but I can tell you when I was in high school, we kind of went page by page through the book. Teachers don't do that anymore. They look at the content standards, and they may use some text from the textbook, and they may use web resources, and they might have students do projects in order to learn those content standards. But we're going to provide some additional resources to kind of balance out the concerns that our community brought to our attention. And because at this point, when we do a textbook adoption, we do it for a 6-year period, and that's how we budget it out. It may surprise you, but it costs us about $400,000 to purchase this particular book. So it's not as easy as just throwing the book away and going and buying another one. That's
fair. That's a fair observation. And Michelle, I think it's great for you to come on and for you to answer my questions. I feel good about the fact that you've been responsive to the community, and that was evident in the news story that we began the discussion with yesterday, and the fact that you're willing to come on here. And I think that if people continue to have discussions like this, we can actually see that local control of schools be exercised in a stronger and stronger way. And at the end of the day, what I want to do is I want to help people think clearly. I want to obliterate confusion and replace it with as much clarity as possible. Given that we are living through some incredibly confusing times, in which you do have some rather agenda-driven folks in a lot of different avenues of life, from politics to culture to academia, that have different desires for the outcomes of the kids that are in those systems. And I want to see kids learn what 2 + 2 is. I want to see them learn how to read coherently and to understand what it is that they are reading. And I want us to be more thoughtful about how we not just engage the public process, but also remind people that work for public entities like public school systems that they work largely at our pleasure, at our behest. We're the taxpayers, and it's us that has the final say. And I think that there needs to be some balance in terms of how some districts have responded to some of its constituencies in the past. So I give you kudos for that. Appreciate you coming on. And if there's any further way that we can help clarify the matter in the days or weeks to come, please don't hesitate to reach out to me personally, and let's have another discussion about it, because I think that's helpful.
Hey, Kevin, anytime you want someone to come on and give a perspective, because, I didn't start in public education. I started it in the private sector, and I decided I wanted to make a difference in public education, and I switched careers.
Well, that's what we need. We need ambassadors of the real world to go into the public world and explain what the difference is.
And let's start from common ground and work on those issues in a problem-solving way.
Deal. Michelle, thank you for coming on. Michelle Irwin, Director of District Communications. I give her kudos for being with us today. It's AFA Today. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us. And we continue just a second here on AFA Today on AFR Talk. By the way, if you've not done it yet, you can join the discussion on our Facebook page at afatoday.com. More than happy to have you weighing in there. And Michelle's clip will be there later this afternoon. You can re-listen to some of her reaction to the coverage we had about the textbook issue in Orlando, Brevard County, Florida yesterday, as well as today. Kevin McCullough coming right back from New York on AFA Today on AFR Talk.